What's the story? With Mr. McGrory. Welcome to week 3 of Numeracy News. This week you'll be doing the subtraction of integers. This week Mrs. Murphy is going to show you what to do. Over to you, Mrs. Murphy.
So I'm going to show you the SWB way to subtract integers. You should have in front of you a copy of the subtracting integers activity sheet. Okay, so what you're going to do is write in to these boxes the correct method, the SWB way to subtract each of these integer questions. So let's look at the first one. So our first question is 7,684 subtract 563. And the first thing that you will notice is that I have started by lining up the digits. So in this I have my ones digits. In this column I have my tens digits. In this column I have my hundreds digits, and in this column I have my thousands digits. So if we look at the step-by-step instructions, step 1, put the numbers into columns. Make sure the numbers are in line, e.g. ones are in the same column as ones. So that's what I've done so far. The next thing I'm going to do is look at step 2. Step 2. If there are gaps in a column, put a 0 in the gap. So I do have a gap. My gap is here in my thousands column because my second number only has hundreds, tens and ones. So I'm going to put a 0 in that gap. I've used a different coloured pen to help that stand out. Now I'm looking at step 3. I'm going to start subtracting from the furthest right column and work my way left through the problem. So I'm going to start on the ones column and do 4 subtract 3. I know that 4 subtract 3 leaves me with 1. I'm now going to move left through the problem. So I'm looking at the tens column and I'm doing 8 subtract 6, and I know that the answer to that is 2. I'm now looking at the hundreds column and I'm doing 6 subtract 5, and I know that leaves me with an answer of 1. I'm now on the last column and I'm looking at the thousands column and I have 7 subtract 0. If I subtract nothing from 7, that leaves me with 7. So my final answer to this subtraction is 7,121. I'm now going to look at how I might get that same question incorrect. So we're starting with question 1 again, and that question is 7,684 subtract 563. So the mistake that you can see that I've made on this subtraction is that I have failed to line up the numbers in the columns correctly. I've had set 563, but I've started lining up from the left instead of from the right, so I have 500 in my thousands column. So I will end up with the wrong answer here. So it is really important that you get step 1 correct. So this will give me the wrong answer. Just a reminder there, we are reminding you that you line up from the ones column each of your numbers. Okay, let's have a look at question 2. So question 2 is 18,614 subtract 376. So again, from step 1, I have lined up from this right-hand side with my ones column, and then my tens, hundreds, thousands, and in this case, 10,000s. My next step is to put some zeros in where I have gaps. So I've put those in there. I'm now going to do step 3 and start subtracting from the furthest right column. 4 subtract 6. Now I know that 6 is a larger number than 4. So at this stage I need to look at step 4. So step 4 tells me that if a column has a digit at the top that is lower than the one below, borrow 1 from the columns to the left. So that is the case here. 6 is greater than 4. So I need to borrow from my tens column. So I'm going to borrow from here where I have 1 10 and exchange it to give me 10 ones. So I now have 14 subtract 6. And because 14 is greater than 6, I can do that subtraction. And that leaves me with an answer of 8. Because I've borrowed from here, I now don't have 1 here. So I need to put a 0 to show that there's nothing left in that tens column. So because 7 is greater than 0, I will again need to borrow, this time from the hundreds column. And I'm going to exchange 6 hundreds, leaving me with 5 hundreds, for 10 tens. So that now gives me 10 tens in this column, and I can do 10 subtract 7, which leaves me with 3. I now have 5 subtract 3. Because 3 is less than 5, I can do that subtraction as normal, and that leaves me with 2. I then have 8 subtract 0, which is 8, and 1 subtract 0, which is 1. So my answer to this subtraction is 18,238. I'm now going to look at question 3. So question 3, my question is 3,087 subtract 493. So I've lined them up following step 1, and I'm going to put in a 0 where I have a gap. I'm now going to subtract 3 from 7. So 7 subtract 3 leaves me with 4. 8 subtract 9, because 9 is greater than 8, I will need to borrow. But I have nothing in the hundreds column, so I will need to borrow from the thousands column. So I borrow from here, and this brings that number down to 2 thousands. I can then bring 10 hundreds across and borrow from there, leaving me with 9 hundreds, and then bring that across to the tens column, leaving me with 18 subtract 9, which I know is 9. I now have 9 subtract 4 in my hundreds column, that leaves me with 5, and 2 subtract 0, which leaves me with 2. So my answer to question 3 is 2,594. So the last question that I'm going to look at on this sheet is question 4. And on question 4, you will notice this is a little bit different. There are 2 numbers being subtracted from the 6,842. It doesn't matter which of these 2 we subtract first, but it will make it easier if we split it into 2 calculations. So I'm going to subtract the larger of the 2 numbers first. So I'm going to start off with 6,842. and I'm subtracting the larger of the two numbers in the question, which is the 1089. I'm going to do that part first. So, to subtract 9, I know that 9 is greater than 2, so I will need to borrow and exchange. So I'm borrowing from the 4 tens, leaving me with only 3 tens, and that gives me now 12 subtract 9, and the answer to that is 3. In the tens column I now have 3 subtract 8, and again 8 is greater than 3, so I will need to borrow from the hundreds column, leaving me with 7 hundreds, but giving me 13 tens, so that I can subtract 8. 13 subtract 8 leaves me with 5. 7 subtract 0 remains as 7, and 6 subtract 1 leaves us with 5. So I've now subtracted the larger of the two numbers in the question, but I'm not finished yet. I now need to take this answer and subtract 767 from it. So, in a new space, I'm going to take 5,753 and subtract 767. Starting with the ones column, 3 subtract 7. 7 is greater than 3, so I will need to borrow and exchange. So that leaves me with 4 tens, and I now have 13 subtract 7. 13 subtract 7 leaves me with 6. 4 subtract 6. 6 is greater than 4, so again I will need to borrow. So I'm borrowing from the hundreds column this time, leaving me with 6 hundreds, and I now have 14 tens. 14 subtract 6 leaves me with 8. 6 subtract 7. Again, 7 is greater than 6, so I need to borrow from this time the thousands column, leaving me with 4 thousands, and I now have 16 hundreds. So 16 subtract 7. 16 subtract 7 leaves me with 9. I've realised that I've forgotten to put in my 0. So my last calculation, 4 subtract 0, leaves me with 4. So the final answer to the calculation for question 4 is 4,986. Make sure that you've got those written onto the SWB way 2, and then start working on the diagnostic questions that are on the rest of your sheet. Start with the level 1, completing these questions where you've got to fill in the gaps, move to level 2, and then finish with level 3 to make sure that you are confident with all of those skills.
So now you've been shown what to do, it's over to you. Pens and pencils at the ready, off you go.